Good afternoon, everyone. This is Colin Daviud with MLevel. We've got a lot of attendees coming on right now. I can see the attendee list scrolling, the numbers scrolling as I'm talking. And so we'll get started in about 30 seconds. I want to encourage everyone to use our chat feature. Just click on the attendee chat at the top of the left-hand side of your screen there, and you're welcome to ask questions. We'll pass on to Lamont in Jordan. And I also put a link to our LinkedIn group in the chat, as well as we'll drop a couple other links in there as well. So just kind of pay attention to that while you're focusing, hopefully, on the webinar. So it's time to get started. I want to introduce you to Jordan Fladell and let him take it from there.
Thanks, Colin, and thanks everyone for joining us on the fourth edition of our webinar series. And today we are truly privileged to have a unique guest join us from north of the border up in Canada. I'd like to take a moment to welcome Lamont Exeter from TTEC, formerly known as TTEC, and he is the Vice President of Learning and Performance. And why I'm so excited about today's webinar session is over the last last three sessions, we've been very focused on delivering engaging content, viewing it much more from individuals who have expertise in one learning vertical or one learning discipline. We had Carl from Gamification. We had Scott from Western from GP Strategies, and then we had Brandon Carson and Ricardo from the Home Depot. And each one of them were individual experts in what they're doing and presenting their challenges. But what Lamont's going to bring to the table today is quite unique. From his background, as Lamont gets the opportunity to travel the globe and learn about everyone's challenges versus just one individual company or one discipline. So with that, I'd love to get started and get Lamont to at least give us a background on the name change, the artist formerly known as TTEC, now known as TTEC. Lamont, I'd love to just understand kind of a little bit more about why the name change and what was it, a change in focus, or where things are going moving forward for you. And thanks again for joining.
Well, thanks for having us, TTEC here, and myself, Jordan. And I'm glad that the Canada Day, that the energy from Family Day in Canada has spread over to you. You sound up and about and ready to have some fun today. So we at TTEC, we were formerly TTEC. We grew up with a contact center company for 35 plus years. And with the evolution within today's world being much more digital, being very engaging, and people wanting information, how they want it, when they want it, the world has changed, in our business, and the way that we engage with our customers and their customers has changed dramatically. So what has happened is, whether it's on the talent development side, how we engage with employees, how we have empowered those employees to interact with the end user customer, that whole employee experience and customer experience has evolved so much that TTEC just didn't represent what we did anymore. So through a lot of research, marketing, and fun stuff, we simplified it and came with TTEC, and that's our new go-to-market brand.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that.
So that's a great prelude. That's where we're at and how we got here.
Awesome. That's a great prelude to my first opening question beyond the easy one, Lamont. I promise you they will get harder throughout this. So without naming names, obviously we want to protect the innocent when we talk about companies. As I mentioned, you have spanned the globe everywhere from, Australia to the coast of the U.S. and more. You've seen all different types of contact center and customer service environments over the span of your career. Give us a sense of the wide range of companies that you've had a chance to see, and what type of different service and contact centers you've had the experience to either help in a consulting sense or partner with your role here at TTEC or TTEC.
And that's one of the fun parts about our role is we do get this touch on industries from finance to insurance, healthcare, automotive, telco, and it's literally on any given day or week, it feels like we're interacting with 7 to 10 different companies, and we know their business quite intimately. We have a team of specialists who live within that world. So when you talk about the global reach, yes, we have a massive footprint within North America, being the U.S. and Canada, but also we have a large amount of clients in Europe and also within Asia Pac. With Australia being probably our third biggest market, And then also within China and Thailand, we have a fair bit of clients over there. One of the things that we've learned through this is how much you can learn from emerging markets, because several years ago, I remember when I first went to Turkey and seeing how they operate, and in '08 going into Japan and interacting with our clients over there and seeing the rave that was texting, it got us thinking, okay, because of the market and some of those emerging markets having their different challenges, or how those cultures interact, you saw things that later became quite popular in North America. And having that insight and being able to have clients from around the world and stealing or borrowing best practices from each of them and sharing with others, that's one of the truly remarkable and powerful opportunities that we're able to do here at TTEC.
Well, awesome. And so, given that wide variety of companies and global reach and the contact centers you interacted with, do you find that there are common challenges that companies run into when building effective training experiences for their employees? I mean, given that you've covered things from Turkey to Australia to Canada to the U.S., everybody that we often run into often thinks they're unique. But I imagine someone like yourself who had the chance to see a wide array of diverse companies might find some commonalities that we as all training professionals can kind of lock ourselves into and feel better, because I know always when I have a problem, I always feel better when others are sharing the same problem that I have.
And that's true. And there are nuances and uniquenesses to every company. I just don't think we're as unique as we oftentimes think we are, because at the end of the day, we're employing people, and people have some fundamental needs and fundamental challenges. I will say, just thinking out loud, there would be probably 4 things I would look at that are quite common along the learning and HR business. And the first one is just knowing the operational business that we support. There's a lot of times that we don't live in their world. We don't speak their language. We don't know their metrics and their drivers. And it's far too often when HR or learning do not get a seat at the table, it's because we're speaking in terms of items that the business doesn't really care about. Like, there are times that I hear learning professionals talk about engagement and these different soft values when the business cares about other things. Now, they merge, they intersect, they work well together, but if we can take some of the things that have been historically important to us and translate them into a language, a metric, a KPI that's prevalent to the business, that would be one. A lot of companies to that point also get in their way of get in their own way by saying that they're so unique, that they buy platforms or services or technologies and then they change them so much that they're no longer what they are. Luckily, the cloud is preventing some of this from taking place, but being able to, if you're going to a particular company and you're going for them for a best practice, take their best practice and modify your processes to align with those and move forward. And that would be probably my number 3, where we are too traditional sometimes and too conservative and conventional in our learning practices. The world has changed. You talk to a 4 or 5-year-old nowadays, and you put a laptop in front of them, and they're touching the screen and wondering why it's not moving if it's not a touch screen. The way they use tablets and the way they interact or communicate with one another is very different. You talk about teenagers, and people say, well, they're not social or they don't know how to communicate. They do. They just do it in their own way. And we as adults, as we come into our world, we've picked up so much on that. And the way that we socially interact and we trust each other is so different now. And that's why emerging technologies such as Yelp or TripAdvisor or any of these social tools that give you guidance on where to go for anything from eating to when you Uber or Lyft or do anything, we really trust each other. So we have to stop being so traditional and start thinking creatively on how the world truly operates, which would be my 4th point, which is our employees, we have to treat them like humans, and we have to remember that they're people. So when people are not at work, what do? And when we find things like that, and we build our systems, our platforms, our environments, our processes, our procedures around what people do in their personal life and translate that into work, that solves the previous challenge that I just mentioned about stop being so traditional, and it makes the workplace quite fun and engaging, and it gets people to be aligned. So, Jordan, I'll pass it back over to you, but those are the 4 that came to my head from that.
Okay, well, that's great. And I think before we jump into the deck, I see this gigantic world of real-time learning, and I know you and I have authored an article on this subject, but Before we jump into your deck, I'd love to maybe that is your first slide, maybe just talk a little bit about what is the real-time learning. What does it mean to you, right? If you think about, in general, real-time is one of those magical words that we all struggle to deliver on, whether it's in technology for data purposes and reviewing data, whether we want real-time responses from individuals when we give them a question. What do you mean by real-time learning when you talk about this concept and how TTEC kind of goes to market and help clients reach this objective?
And Jordan, from the time I met you down in Atlanta several years ago, we really kicked it off because we both at the time had younger people in our lives, and we saw the way that they learned, they interacted, and it affected us, and now it affects everyone around us. So whether it's my mom and she wants to learn how to cook a particular type of food, or if I need to go and cook something, I'm not going to a cookbook or I'm not taking a course. I'm going on Tasty. And I'm finding out how to do it. I'm getting the video. I'm following the instructions, and that's the real-time nature of it. If I want to go and do something, and for instance, the other day I wanted to change the wiper blades on my car, and it was as simple as going into YouTube, putting in the model, the make and model, finding it out, and doing it real time on the spot. That if you take that notion of what I'm considering a real time right there, and you apply it to all facets of the business world. So you're interacting with the customer, you need information, as opposed to putting someone in the contact center space through 2, 3, 8 weeks of onboarding and expect them to come out and be proficient. Let's go ahead and teach them the basics, teach them on specific customer interaction types, what they need to know to be proficient, equip them with the tools so they can access that information efficiently, making sure that they're qualified and competent at that. And then while interacting with their customers, whether it's in a retail floor space, on the phone, whatever environment, being able to quickly get that information if they don't know it spontaneously in their head, being able to reference it, find it, and then either show it to that customer while they're doing it, or capture, consume it, and then educate that customer on it. That's the type of real time. It's getting information, the type of information I want, when I want it, in the format I want it, so that I can be proficient when interacting with people. That's my long-winded answer to your very short question.
Well, I appreciate the long-winded answers, and I'm sure the entire audience base is like, well, that sounds great in concept, but how do we go execute it? But I don't want to jump ahead too far in the presentation for you here, Lamont. So I'm going to give you the floor back, and you can kind of walk us through, your kind of view, and you obviously put this wonderful deck together for everybody. So why don't you take a little bit here to go through the deck? And again, if you're an attendee and you have questions specifically related to real-time learning, or related to any subject that's on your mind related to contact centers or how to service the customer experience, please go ahead and put your questions into the queue, and we'll make sure we get to them. So go ahead, Lamont, and I'll be sure to chime in the background. Don't worry.
Of course you will. So I'm gonna, and you mentioned the chat, so I'm gonna ask the audience that when we talk about classroom learning, can you go ahead and write down in the chat what comes to your mind when we say classroom learning? Because we would love to get some of that feedback on what that means to you, so that we can roll that out into the rest. And I see Daryl Speed was like the first one there. So I am going to just read them: instructor-led, having to sit still, daydreaming, passive, bored after 8 hours. Wow, high five. So this image that you're seeing right here, it should resonate with you. Loss of productivity, time away. Now, wow, those were a plethora of awesome answers. And that's yesterday's world. If you see in this image, people are generally not engaged. A facilitator is drinking gallons of water in order to get through the day because he or she is talking and educating themselves. They feel as though they have to be the subject matter expert, but it's boring. And not many of us want to do that. Not many of us would even sit here and listen to me for an hour, and I can't really blame you. So that's why Jordan and I have the interaction going back and forth. There's different things that you need to do. Not only must there be some form of an entertainment aspect to it, but there must also be a type of practical, this applies to me, I can use it, I can practice it. So when we're doing this in any sense, when we're talking about real-time and onboarding, and we're talking about giving information, letting people go and practice it, they get immediate real-time feedback, they take that feedback, they apply it, they get coaching, and wrapping that whole closed-loop process over and over again and making it practical within their onboarding, that is absolutely essential. And in today's business world, training, well, it always has, but especially in today's world, it costs money. So if you're going to pull a person and put them through several weeks of onboarding, there's a cost of salaries for that, there's benefits, then there's what is the graduation rate, the attrition rate, there's the cost of the facilitator, cost of the time, lack of productivity. All those things come into play, and it becomes a very inefficient and expensive way of doing something, as opposed to giving people the information, getting them in the production floor, practicing it prior to them practicing in a safe environment. That's really what we're going towards. So thank you all for those comments in there, because they really did resonate. And then there's the kicker. So you go through this onboarding. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, Lamont, there, I was going to say, you just rolled out. I was going to say, I thought you did a great job there of talking about the classroom experience. But if I'm sitting here, and I always love to walk in the shoes of others, right? And if I'm sitting here and I'm at a gigantic enterprise, maybe in a very large global company, and we've traditionally had investment in classrooms, we've made all this investment in massive e-learning infrastructure to be supported in these classrooms, we've had all these instructors. And what you're really saying is you want me to take all this down and go back up to my boss and say, all these things I told you to invest in maybe 5-10 years ago are no longer relevant. And learning traditionally hasn't changed that much as a business. So how does someone get the courage to go down that hallway, and how does someone, kind of build that justification as they move forward to have that conversation or that story with their boss to make the change?
Well, I'm going to tie that into what we talked about on this slide as we go forward is you just put a person through 8 weeks of training, and you come back to them and they forget how to do something. You say, well, you were taught that on day 7. And they look at you and say, well, I don't remember it. Do you blame them? And then at what point is the investment that you've just rolled out over the past 4, 5, 10 years, do you have to start changing it? I'm not saying, Jordan, to go in and change it tomorrow and come, because there's a cultural alignment that has to happen. There are technologies that have to be put in place. There's business processes that have to be aligned to. Where we're coming from is if you know that what you're doing today is archaic, or you know that there's a need for change, and I'm gonna be more politically correct, you know there's a need for change, then put a strategy in place that you can get to where you want to get to over the next 3 years. What I struggle with some of our business clients is they say, oh no, that sounds too complex, so we're just not ready for it. Well, if it sounds so complex, but it's something that you want to do, let's now put a strategy in place to start to transition there. Let's start to do some of the simple things to get quick wins, so that when you're building things in the future, you're building them in a much more agile, flexible, gamified, social, collaborative, or real-time way, so that in 3 years, you're not coming back and saying, well, we continue to invest another 3 years and spend another $10 million, and we're even more in debt to the business than we were 3 years ago. It's about having the foresight and the strategy and thinking, how do I get there in the future? And let's start building to that today. And putting a strategy in place is number one. As we talked about earlier, we need to understand what the business levers are, speak to those business levers, speak in that business language, set up KPIs, map to them, align to those, show the ROI on a monthly basis so that you can gain the confidence that you may be asking for a few thousand or 100,000 now, and then you build that confidence, you turn over so that that investment will pay for itself, so that when you go in for the big check or the big ask, it's much easier and much more palatable. Fair game, Jordan?
I think that's helpful. I think that's fair game. I think what basically is while the advent to move to real-time learning is, you still want to have the methodical approach to prove and listen to the business and understand their KPIs, but also have a very slow roll towards getting towards this utopian vision of true real-time learning. So I appreciate that background. I'm sure our attendees do as well. So I'll let you keep on going here.
No problem. And really where we're going with it is, as you go through, as a facilitator, this was one of the most painful things that I could hear when I was when I had someone come out of my training class. It was, well, I taught you that, and they're like, well, I can't remember it, or did you really, or we forgot it. So getting to a point where everything is practical, they get the feedback, they get the reinforcement, that's really what's going to do that. And to me, Jordan, what we're going to do over the next 5 or 6 slides, we're going to talk about some practical solutions that just work in today's world. And the first one is gamification. And I think I'm going to go forward to come back, because the question that I have for the audience, and we've had great participation, so let's hope that continues. When was the last time you received a reward, prize, badge, points, or anything from learning or from doing anything? If you can start to just populate, like, time period, was it a day, a week, a month ago, and what was it for within the chat, that will drive some of the conversation around the gamification piece. But Jordan, gamification, I know it's a really wide used word right now, and for us, the way that we or I define gamification is using game-based mechanics to drive real-world behavior change. And when just in today's world, whether the industries I think nail it the best are like travel and hospitality. So whether you fly Air Canada and you become elite, super elite, 25K, 50K, 75K, or you stay at Hilton or Starwoods, and they have all those different point structures, or it's as simple as when you're in Girl Guides or Cub Scouts. I remember when I was in Cub Scouts, and I used to get these badges on my stash for being able to build a campfire or doing all these different things. In Canada, we had something called, we had these excellence awards around track and field where you'd run and you'd gain these different accomplishments. All those types of things are gamification. And we've been gamified for most part of our life. And as adults, they're gamified, as I talked about in the travel and hospitality industry. When we go to any grocery store and we use that points card, it's using game-based mechanics to drive real-world behavior change. Ultimately, what it comes down to and what we feel is successful is when you can use gamification, learning, in order to use gamification effectively, understand what your audience truly needs and craves and what their interests are. And by doing that, you are then able to you're then able to tailor your gamification to those to drive that real world behavior change. And what that does then is it gives people the rewards for doing the behaviors you want repeated time and again. And when that is done successfully, that is truly the essence around gamification. And this is something that is being used within the learning space. It's being used within real life. But in learning, sometimes we're not as critical with it. So, and what I mean by that is we're not aligning it to business. So it's, if attendance and punctuality is something that's important to your business and you want people to come in on time, then tie that in. But if passing a test is important, that's great, but why not align it to how they behave? Are test scores aligning to quality scores? When you take a particular course on a topic, if that leads to you improving that particular topic in the real world, you get double and triple bonus points. Like, those are the types of complexities that we can get into that are really going to drive where we go. And when you do it like that and you align everything to those operational business drivers, that's when operations gets really excited. That's when the business gets really excited. And that's how you can really grow this particular item above and beyond what we're doing today. And you're seeing that this person is holding in their hand. While in some contexts in the world, you're not allowed to have mobile phones, this can be built into your CRM, whether it's Salesforce or any other system. I know that you do that within MLevel, and you can do it, and you can tie that into any other LMS, and making it prevalent and applicable to their daily lives. That's really what we're doing and what we're talking about with gamification. Now, as we go forward, sorry, go ahead.
Well,
yep.
I was going to say that what you said, Lamont, what you kind of did for me there was you kind of took the moment of taking gamification from what today kind of maybe viewed as in the learning world as a static event to a comprehensive program, similar to how you used a great reference in the travel industry, right? And I think we even had one of our attendees talk about the behavior for getting points for getting their coffee, right? And if you think about both those behaviors, right, they're consistent, right? What we're seeing there is a consistent commitment to that draw of gamification, whereas I like to put gamification's roots are really in loyalty, right? They really start in those loyalty programs you referenced within travel, right? We change human behavior, but we stay consistent with them. And what I find is a lot of companies treat gamification as a single event, right? They'll gamify an experience, that'll drive an experience which will temporarily change behavior. And, you know, I've always used this, and I think, Lamont, you've heard me tell this story before, where if you think about gamification and you say, what other things that don't have consistent gamified programs where people disconnect from a program rather quickly, it's like weight loss or the gym, right? Those are two places where gamification is incorporated, but I don't think that they do a great job of making it easy to be consistent. But when you talk about places that are like in the travel space, you know, they really have figured out how to get people to choose and be loyal to those organizations and continue to be gamified along the way. And I think what you said there is that when companies in the learning space, especially with contact center employees, need to find a way to make gamification part of their fabric so that employees are measured and rewarded for their behaviors and actions that align to the KPIs and goals of the organization on a consistent basis, almost as if they were earning their rewards cards to get another free coffee from Starbucks along the way.
And you're spot on there, and that's really where we're going. If you leave it only within the learning space, I think it's a waste of money and you will struggle. This has to be something that's embedded within the day-to-day fabric of your life and everything that you do within that workspace. And when I'm seeing it in my face, for those of us who travel a lot, it's really simple. Like you see it all the time. But with anything, whether it's going to a particular gas station and driving that loyalty, they're so related. So if in my business world, if I'm getting points for every time I get a quality score over 90%, I get points on a certain level, then I'm going to drive to get better quality because I want those. If attendance is an issue and after every 10 days, 20 days, you get points and they total up, you're subconsciously going to be like, oh man, I'm going to wake up that extra 15 minutes early because I might be in traffic. And when you earn a certain level of status, especially if it's one thing that if you're at work on time and you're late once, people say, okay, that's fine, you're late once. It's different when you have a running total of like 55 days on time. You want to get to that 56. You want to get to that 57th and onward. And if you have to start back at zero, you've almost failed yourself. And people don't like to fail. I think a lot of times we forget about that in life. And this is a way of helping people encourage each other. And whether it's, and you use the weight loss, it's almost like, well, when you're going to the gym and you have that peer who's there to push you, again, it's another form of gamification once you can find appropriate ways to reward and recognize each other on an ongoing basis. So with that said, the other part where we talked about peers is the social collaboration. And whether that social collaboration is done via bots, a bot-assisted social collaboration, or peers, this we feel is so important that we as a collective mass know more than any one individual. So when we are able to get social collaboration working and infuse it with bot assistance, it becomes quite powerful. You have a group of people who are helping each other, providing answers and clarity to one another. You don't have to wait on a facilitator or a quote-unquote expert. You have your peers there who are helping you out. It can be done within a platform. It can be done within a desktop. But we as humans, we naturally share, whether it's on smoke breaks, at the water cooler, wherever it is, we're sharing, we're giving each other feedback. Now what we're doing in today's world is we're using the digital collaboration software to capture it, harvest it. We can run analytics on it. We can do all these powerful tools with it. And bringing that together is what is quite powerful. And I just think so many companies are missing this because they're sometimes afraid of, well, what if bad information is shared? And my answer is bad information is being shared. You're just not capturing it and you don't know about it. Now you can capture it. You can go back to the source of that incorrect information, educate them on why it's incorrect, and then they can go and start sharing the correct information. So all these things, they definitely roll together. But that, Jordan, in today's world, this is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
As we go forward,
I would say that.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say that's a good one. I think when we kind of wrap up, we should love to talk a little bit more about the elements of how to deal with the corporate risk that comes with that social collaboration and with the bots and having people share that information. I think you hit on a touch point there that companies may not know that people are sharing bad information, but I think some of the fear that companies has is not being able to control messaging given the sensitivity of folks today around communication and how people are treated. So I think that if I'm listening on the phone and I look at a big company, that's what's going through my head from, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt is that how do I get past my HR and legal friends? We're going to address that a little bit later. So just still wanted to see that with our listeners.
And we're definitely going to address that at the end. The other parts, I have three others, and then we're going to go back and open it back up, is around augmenting operations. And you see the bot, and when I was growing up, we had Star Wars, and people were like, oh, that will never happen. You'll never actually talk to a robot like that. And now we talk with bots, we interact with bots, and and the visual for this was specific. We wanted it to look like a robot, but in today's world, bots don't have to look like that. Ultimately, what it comes down to is how can you set up environments using artificial intelligence, using machine learning, using deep learning to be able to have people practice and get real-time feedback 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, without having a human right there beside them. We are in this virtual world. I think, Jordan, we've only actually met once, but we speak so many times. We're on video. We're doing all these different types of communication that we feel like we know one another quite well. So you put that in a business sense. There are some of my colleagues, and again, we're a global company, but I've never physically met them, but I know more about them than I know about people who are in my own building or on my street. It's because in today's virtual world, we can have a lot of things happen. Where the augmented operations comes into play, if you can find a way to simulate your operational environment where people can feel as though they are interacting with a real customer, or if you're a manager, you're interacting with an employee and you're giving him or her feedback. Because oftentimes we forget about giving about the management development part. But being able to be a manager, to be able to have a difficult conversation around any topic with somebody else and having that person talk back to you, it's one thing to do it with a real person, but if you've never had practice. But when you can have practice interacting with a virtual assistant who's playing the role of an employee, and you are seeing their face adjust, you're on video, your body language, and you get feedback and coaching on all this, that's augmenting operations. That's augmenting and simulating the operational world. And being able to do that, and that's something that companies really don't do as great of a job at as they really should. But that is going to be a very critical part of life going forward. And getting that nailed will be essential. And then just before we go on to the last topic is personalized coaching. So again, in today's world, that personalized coach does not have to be in front of you. You could be able to take an interaction and post it online, have somebody go in, give you feedback on it. You could have that one-on-one interaction from experts around the world. If you have an expert in one part in New York and another one in LA, another one in Dallas, and one in Miami, you can have people on all over the U.S. who are sharing feedback, all over the world sharing feedback, and now you're getting coaching from experts. You can be able to pick up that device or tap in and have a video real time with them. And as much as the bot becomes important, having that one-on-one coaching can become so essential. This is a part of the real time. It is great that if you have a struggle on a particular topic, you can tap into an expert, get somebody, have a conversation with them, then get back to either the customer, return that customer's call, re-engage with them. You may want to put that customer on hold for 30 seconds, but that real-time personalized coaching is absolutely essential. And in today's world where we're capturing all the data real time and we can listen to a conversation or tap into it, those are some of the parts that we feel are absolutely essential going forward, because this is present today. This is not something that's going to be coming in 3 or 4 years that we have to prepare for. This is how some of the leading edge companies are doing stuff today. So Jordan, I know we have a question for the overall audience who can hopefully chime in with some additional feedback about their comfort level. Ultimately, the audience question is: are you more comfortable learning with a peer, a manager, or a bot? Because we talked about social, we talked about one-to-one, we talked about bot and machine-based. Just to the audience, which one are you most comfortable getting feedback and learning from? And Jordan, while we're waiting for the folks to chime in with some of their answers, I'm sure you have some questions for me.
I do, Lamont. While the group's all chiming in, and I really appreciate everyone's participation in this, you talked about the concept of real-time learning and how it benefits the employee, right? You've talked about how that's what the employee wants, and that's awesome, right? But, the key thing that I think we have to do is really give maybe some key benefits that the company gets, right? So we touched on this a little bit when I teased the question of how to justify the business case, or but when you think about what are the specific benefits a company gets from moving to this real-time learning model that you're proposing?
There's the three main ones that we've seen. One is cost, two is efficiency, and three is quality. So it saves money. I know earlier somebody mentioned something about classroom training being expensive. So there's a sustained cost. There's a sustained cost of having ongoing high attrition, high turnover training where you are pulling people like a trainer or a supervisor, coach, like all these people off their day job to support that classroom. There is a cost around it. Their labor is not getting any cheaper. All those things are going up into play. So if you can reduce the time to productivity, both from in a classroom and then the time to efficiency once they're outside of the classroom and now they're efficient, that is a massive saving. The next one we talked about I mentioned was efficiency. And everyone doesn't need the same thing. We don't all start at the same point. So if you can have your training coming in that there's an assessment, an effective assessment that gauges where everyone is at, and then of the, let's just say 100 modules that people have to go through, some of them are requirements, some are just absolute compulsory, but others are optional, and others I can test out. If I'm already proficient, I think I've been using Apple products exclusively for the past 5 years. If I'm going in and I'm working for Apple and you're going to give me a tutorial on how to use an iPhone, I will probably fall asleep in that class. So the thing is, if someone is proficient in a particular device or they have experience, why put them through the same training as somebody who's brand new and novice? There's a struggle with that. So by being able to tailor the learning, not only does it drive employee satisfaction, which is great, but there's a direct cost savings. That person can graduate earlier, you pay them less for training and become productive quicker. So there's a whole efficiency aspect with that. And then with efficiency, especially when it comes to workforce management, for any up training or cross-skilling, being able to push information, that means you don't have to pull large groups off the phone. It just becomes much easier from a scheduling perspective. So WFM love you. Operations loves you because you're not pulling them off. Before it was, well, you have to pull people off in 15-minute chunks for e-learning. Now it's between calls, you have 30 seconds, you have a minute, you can go and take that content. And then quality and consistency drive, you want consistent high quality. So you want to be able to repeat the number of repeat callers. You want to have other measurable statistics. Whatever quality is to your company, being able to drive quality by creating consistent learning matter. You're having a single voice, which is that digital voice, whether it's somebody live, doing a live video, a pre-recorded on-demand video, a digital course that was created for a viral purpose, anything like that, there's a sustained quality impact there. And the last piece that I'm going to tie into what folks are saying here, there is no one right answer. If you, Jordan, if you scroll back up, you're going to see whether peer, manager, or bot, there's been a wide array. Some people are saying bots, managers, peers. Now you're giving me, the employee, the choice. So Joe can get, we can set it up, or the company can set it up so that Joe gets feedback first from the bot, or Amy would get it from a peer or a bot, or Pamela would get it from a peer. You can set it up so that people are getting the feedback that they want from the source that they want it, in the format that they want it. And those are the types of things that personalize that interaction. So it's not one size fits all. You can set it up so that there's a hierarchy. Maybe some specific information must come from the manager because of some sensitivity. But others, if people just are like, I don't need to talk to my manager, just have the bot provide me the feedback real time, why not? I want to hear my peers. Your peers, it can get pushed to your peers and they drive feedback for you. All those things are applicable and present in today's world. We're just overall, as learning organizations, we're just not using it enough. And that's where we really have to get to. As much as there's a technology play, there's a huge process and culture piece that we have to tie into this to make it really applicable. So, Jordan, I think I answered your question. I tried to tie it into some of the stuff that the team was saying, and I'll pass it back over to you.
No problem. So we've talked about the benefits that an employee gets, a benefit that the company gets, but I imagine if I'm an instructional designer listening on this call, the first thing I'm thinking about is, okay, Lamont, that's all great. You just said that learning isn't a hat and that one size doesn't fit all. But now, what I really want to know is, does really all content and fit the real-time learning approach, i.e. bundling it in with gamification, bots, video, et cetera? I mean, how do you really make that happen? We're talking about, there's specialized content types that belong in real-time learning events and things that simply just don't, or is everything belong in real-time learning?
I'm not going to say everything because I'll get myself in trouble, because I'm sure there's an example out there that I have not thought of or experienced yet. I can just tell you that I haven't yet experienced one that doesn't work, and that's where I'm going to come to. We've rolled out real-time learning experiences in the use of digital, the use of collaboration, across the industries that we spoke about earlier, whether it's automotive, healthcare, financial, insurance, telecommunications. We've been successful with it. We've mapped it against the KPIs. We've had conversations with the operational and business leaders, and they're bought in. Funny enough, some of the biggest pushback we get are from the learning leaders. When we speak to the operational folks, they're like, yeah, of course, that's how I do it today. Like, I use YouTube. When we speak with some of the learning leaders or some of the learning professionals who are too conservative in their thinking as well, no, you have to have it this particular way. I think you did once upon a time. The world is changing, and in today's world, get creative, try new things. It may not work the first time. That doesn't mean that you throw it out. It means that it didn't work that particular time. So what was successful? What could you do? What could you modify? And keep going at it and try new things, because whether we like it or not, the world is changing and will continue to evolve, and we just can't get left behind. So again, we've seen it with compliance. We've seen it with sales. We've seen it with management development. We've seen it with handling difficult situations internally and with customers. And Jordan, in every time, it may not work right away. Sometimes there's technology challenges, sometimes there's cultural challenges, but once you address those and you really work with those business leaders and you work with the audience and understand what they're comfortable with, we've just seen it, and we've seen it to be successful.
Well, that's awesome. So, obviously, I know there's a few more slides to cover. I want to encourage our attendees to throw any questions and not let me monopolize the time here. All the questions coming your way. Appreciate that answer there. So, as you've talked a lot about technology here, Lamont, and I know we've talked a little bit about, it's not all about technology, but at the end of the day, I think all of us who've got experience in working in the contact center world know we're a bit limited, we feel a bit limited by the technology put in front of us, or the technology that the agents have at their desk, right, when they're doing their job, and the rules and restrictions that our peers in IT and security place upon us from a standpoint of what we can and can't do. What is your view, how companies should look at their future IT learning stack? Do they want to pick one technology or platform, or maybe take a different approach, kind of like maybe build a service-oriented architecture that allows them to plug and play point solutions of choice, giving them the power of flexibility to move forward? You've seen a lot. You've been all over the world, and you know the pains that our folks are on the phone are listening to. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what would you do if you had, if you were in those shoes and had to recommend they build their learning stack on the IT side.
Well, the fun part is we are in those shoes, because we have an audience of 50-odd thousand employees that we need to support and build learning and everything like that for. So, and the approach that we took is the same approach that a lot of people take when they're at home and they're building out their home networks and in this connected house. So when you're in a connected house, the question is, are all your products necessarily Samsung? Well, no. You oftentimes take best of breed and you make them connected. You get them connected. That's the overall approach that we've done and we continue to do. We introduce our partners to one another, and we get them to talk to each other. And then what we do is we make sure that they can all play. So there has to be some foundation. Here's where you work with your IT team. Because IT has to be your friend, or else your life is going to be much more challenging. So we work with IT and we understand what is the framework, what is the architecture, what do you need, what are the REST APIs, what are the REST service calls, what is everything that needs to work. Then from there, that becomes one of the few requirements that we go out to with our partners. And we say, look, you need to work in this environment because we need to be collaborative, whether it's single sign-on, if it's integration with Salesforce, how it needs to speak back and forth, or whatever the CRM of choice, LMS systems, knowledge-based systems, collaboration platforms, gamification platforms, and all these different stacks. So just like in your home where you may have a Samsung fridge, you may have a Whirlpool washer dryer, you may have Nest, you may have Logitech for your video camera, you have all these different things, but they can be connected on a single device. That's the same premise that we do when we're building out solutions within our workplace. We say we need you all to work together. I personally believe in best of breed, going out there and saying who is the best in the market that's going to do what I need you to do, right? Not necessarily who's the best overall, but who's the best that needs to do what I want, that I need you to. Roll with them. Again, we're not changing their processes. We're bringing them in because they're an expert in a particular way. We may need to amend some of our processes. We do our best not to adjust code, so we will configure within their environment, but we try to stay away from customizations because customizations are expensive. And we bring those best of breed together. I don't know of a technology out there that does everything exceptionally well or well enough, and that's why you have connections. So hope I answered your question there, Jordan. It's all about bringing best of breed together and creating that ideal stack while working with the technology team to make sure that it aligns with their requirements and security protocol.
Yeah, and I think that's a great summary there, right? And I think the home analogy is a great one, and I think the laggard I'll add to that, or the difference between being at your house and being in a corporate environment is, we have these legacy infrastructure in a corporate environment, that the things such as a legacy LMS, right? And there's value in every piece of technology in the stack. And so, what I would always tell people is that you don't throw away, legacy investments in technology, especially if it has a purpose or value. And your LMS is still a great record keeper, right? It still does a great job of tracking, results and issuing out learning programs. And maybe the best approach is to figure out how to get your LMS and put a modern interface on the front end of it to allow you to have real-time interactions and incorporate things like bots or gamification or micro-learning. And, you need to have this kind of mindset that says, if I'm going back and asking them to throw away something and replace it, I'm kind of wasting dollars, right? You wouldn't, if you had a piece of technology in your house that was on your home budget, you wouldn't necessarily throw away a TV if your TV works within your environment just because you want a new one, right? Just because there's one with 5 more features. If that legacy TV meets your goals and objectives and still allows you to watch, Netflix on it and do the things you need to do in your world, or get corporate YouTube, you're not just going to go replace it. So I think that mindset of finding, all the best-in-class learning technologies, bringing them together to solve your solution is a great way, if I'm a learning professional in the contact center, to approach my IT partners. Because one thing IT partners don't want to do is have to kind of go through the process of replacing everything. And also, I would encourage everyone to know what you currently have the capabilities to do today, right? That's one thing that we often hear from a lot of folks is, I need to get a brand new system because it doesn't do X, and then they go down the path of, doing a search, meeting with vendors, and then they go back to the procurement and IT organization. The first question they ask is, well, are you sure the system can't do it today? Right? So always make sure you've checked. And in most cases it can't, but you should always make sure that check comes in. So, Lamont, we've got about 11 minutes left, maybe 10, and I want to make sure, again, if there's any questions from the folks out there, to put them on in. As we wrap up here today, when you think about, what other parting messages or words of wisdom do you have for those folks on the phone? You shared a lot about real-time learning. You shared a lot about work with your IT partners. You touched a little bit upon this, and maybe you'll conclude with this, maybe to expand a little bit around, what is the right way to work with your business partner? Because when we talk about IT, well, they're going to be the executors of your vision, and your instructional design team and partners are going to help you get the content ready, and your vendors are going to be the tool partners. Where you really need to make hay is with your business partners. And so how do you build that rapport and demonstrate value and continue to be able to work with them, because they're going to help you fund what you want to do, and it's kind of like a win-win, right, situation there. So what would be the final words of wisdom you'd pass on to everyone related to that subject.
So going back to your TV example, you're absolutely right. You don't just get rid of something because you want something new, but you do need to start planning for the future. So if you want to have a fully connected house in the next 10 years or 5 years, whatever the state is, use whatever new technology you get. You want to make sure that any new purchase can align to it, and then find the correct use case for the technology, whether it's an LMS and using it as a record-keeping system and putting a GUI over it to make it sexy, or integrating it into your social collaboration platform so it sits on the back end with single sign-on and deep links. There's a lot of different things that you can do once you know where you want. So getting a strategy and having that strategy aligned to the business objectives of the organization in language that they understand with KPIs and measurements to align to them, that is absolutely essential. And when you can get that, that would be the biggest part. That to us, that's ground zero, and unfortunately, a lot of people skip that. But once you can get that in place, it makes everything else significantly easier. So to answer that question to you is, I would definitely focus on getting a strategy, creating a multi-year vision, knowing where the business is going, aligning your metrics to those, aligning your strategy to those metrics, getting everything aligned, and making sure that you're on a good foot or at least in alignment with IT, then you're 90% there. Then it just comes down on executing and finding the right partners to play with, which is, quite frankly, once you have everything else in place, that part becomes a lot easier.
Awesome. Lamont, I really want to thank you today for joining, and I want to encourage our attendees who have been a part of today's session, if they have additional questions, to feel free. I know Lamont loves to get bombarded with questions on his via email or on his LinkedIn profile. I'd also encourage you to check out what TTEC brings to the table there if you're running a contact center today or you have a contact or customer experience challenge. And I think we all know that with 55% of all transactions moving into the contact center world by 2020, this is a burning bridge that we all have to get our hands on to figure out how to cost effectively run and operate these. So thanks everybody for joining today. Thank you, Lamont, for participating, and thank you to the TTEC team for all your support. I want to do a little preview here. Next month, you'll get a chance to meet Peter Talmers. Peter Talmers is from an organization called Slalom Consulting, and as we talk today about micro-learning, and we talked a little bit about peers, managers, bots, and all types of different technologies in the space, Peter's going to spend some time talking about a concept called lean learning, and I know that lean fits very well with the strategies that Lamont's laid out today. So I highly encourage those who've joined today to come back next month. I believe we're looking at about a month from today, where Peter will be giving us lots of insight into the concept of lean learning. And again, Lamont, thank you so much. And feel free to contact us at any time with your questions, and look forward to seeing you all next month.